Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to be doing some fun little fishing lures with watercolor today. If we haven't met, I'm Viv, and this is Art with Viv. I'm glad you joined me. Let's get everything ready and let's just start sketching. Now, I really hate sketching on camera because I take so long. I erase so much, but I thought that y'all might get something out of just watching me sketch. Now here for this first lure, I'm just doing sort of a wonky teardrop shape with a point at each end. And just putting in those little metal rings that are at the top where you connect your fishing line, putting on his lips, his big giant round eye. Fishing lures can be so pretty to me. My dad had a tackle box full of them, and I just love to look at all the colors and the feathers and the little dangly things. I don't know, those little shiny spinner things that would be hanging off of them. I loved going in his tackle box and seeing all of those beautiful lures. And truthfully, we went fishing like every single weekend as a family. Well, me, my mom, and my dad. My sisters were older, they were already gone. And we would fish every weekend. So I've been fishing since I was about 6. Although my dad and mom did not trust me with a fishing pole, so what they would do is give me like this little bamboo pole or a little whatever stick they could find on the bank of wherever we were fishing. We fished in a lot of lakes and in the Cape Fear River. Before my dad got a boat, once he got a deep sea fishing boat, then we went to the beach every weekend because we only lived like an hour, a little bit over an hour away. Anyway, and he wouldn't put a hook on my line. He would just tie the bait straight to the fishing line. And miraculously, I would catch minnows with it. Of course, because, the line wasn't that long and I was little. And so the only place I could really fish was right there along the shore where all the eggs had hatched and the little baby minnows were. So I caught bunches of minnows and threw them all back. But eventually I did get my own fishing pole and my own hook. And I was quite the little fisherman. Now, I had never have used fishing lures in my life, but my dad, like I said, he used them all the time, but I have not. But I've always enjoyed just looking at the beautiful shapes, and they're so shiny, and I don't know, I just think that fishing lures are really pretty. And I thought this would make a really good card for Father's Day. This design, you could make a nice little card with it if you like. You could even add more decorations to it if you want. Add another fishing lure, so there's 3. But I'm just doing 2, and they're pretty easy. They're pretty simple. They're really just like teardrops with sort of points on each end. There's not a lot of hard drawing. It's not a difficult thing to draw. And then just putting in their eyes and their markings. And then just putting in where those little metal rings are, and then the hooks that are on them. And that's all you got to do to draw it. It's not a lot of complicated drawing. So once I get all this done, we will start painting. And I will return shortly when we start painting. I am going to go get a sip of sweet tea. And I will return and let you listen to some music. So now that I finished drawing everything, I want to lighten it up with my kneaded eraser. I'm just rubbing my kneaded eraser over it to sort of pick up any excess graphite and clean that up and lighten it up so the lines won't show through the painting. I've got black on my palette. I don't usually use black, but for this one I've got black on my palette, and I'm just painting in his eye on the first lure, the middle part of his eye, and on the other lure. But on the other one, I'm going to leave a little tiny bit of white of the paper shining through so that there'll be a little highlight on there. And then I'm coming back up and picking up some of that pigment on that top eye because I don't want it to be a solid black. I want it to have some light and some dark areas. And I'm going to mix up a nice dark green. The top of this fishing lure looks green to me, so I'm going to go ahead and get that nice green and paint like a little green stripe across his top, and then just take my paintbrush and dip it in water and just sort of blend that green down toward the middle part of his body. Not too far though. I want to keep it sort of in the same location, but we want to have that one edge a little bit blended, a little bit soft. By the way, I am working with 140-pound hot press paper, which is unusual for me. I love cold press paper, but I just wanted to try something different. Sometimes I like to mix it up a little bit, so I'm just working on some cold press paper here, 140 pound, and I have to be really careful with it because it will streak unless you do wet on wet. If you do wet on the dry paper, it will streak on you. So I'm sort of battling that. I mixed up a nice sort of peachy red tone, and I'm painting that in the colored part of the lure. He's got sort of a nice orangey peachy tone going across the middle part of his body. So I'm going ahead and doing that, and then just taking a little bit of water and blending that peach tone out to almost a pink. I'm going to cover that up with a yellow, so I'm not stressing about it. I just want to make sure that I'm getting those colors. Now I'm poking in there, getting a little bit of yellow. I'm going to cover that pink tone with a little bit of yellow all over his little belly, and I don't care if the pink and the yellow mix to make a little bit of orange. That's fine. I'm not trying to copy the colors of the copy the colors of the lure exactly. I'm just sort of getting approximations in there. It's my lure. I can paint it the colors I want to. Now I've got a nice maroon that I've mixed up, and I'm going in there while it's still wet across his belly. There's a sort of like a little shine, a little reflection there, so I just put it in there right across his belly. I've got a little bit of yellow. We are going around the iris part of his eye, around that pupil. His eye is humongous, and I'm just adding a little bit more black into the center part of that eye, leaving some of the lighter gray shining through for a highlight. And I also add a little bit more at the very top. Now, if you want an outline drawing for this, if you don't feel comfortable with your drawing skills, you can join my Sweet Art Squad for $5 a month, and you will get the outline drawing, the supply list with tips on how to paint, and everything you need to complete this project instruction-wise. Now, you have to provide your own paper and paint. But yeah, so you might want to be interested in that. You might want to go on over to my website and check that out. Now I'm coming back in there with a little bit of a darker sort of, it's that maroon, but it's watered down just a little bit so that it's not as dark as it was around the front part of his face where I had it almost full concentration. I'm watering it down just a little bit so that it's not quite as dark, but it's still a deep maroon. And we're just putting in the shapes that I see. There's some shadows and shapes. I'm just kind of putting those in there and putting in some of those highlights and those lowlights and reflections. Again, since it is a lure, you can have more freedom, a more artistic license. It doesn't have to look exactly like the lure. Now, granted, if you want to make it exactly like the lure, there is not a thing wrong with that. But I am doing it a little more freestyle today. I'm just sort of getting in the basic shapes and the basic shadows, getting in those highlights here and there. And I know that I'm going to come at the end and add some white gel pen, so I'm not getting overly worried about trying to save every white highlight or every really light highlight because I know I'm going to come back with the pen. I mean, this is just a card design, so I don't have to be like really particular about it being a mixed media piece. So now if I was going to put it in a show, I probably would be a lot more particular. I wouldn't use the white gel pen, although there's nothing wrong with that. I just, for my own personal preference, wouldn't use it. I would actually save those white highlights of the paper with some masking fluid and go from there. Now I've added a little bit more green to that back because that's the darkest part of this fishing lure, is that back. Now I'm coming back with that maroon now that it's dried a little bit more in his tummy, and putting that reflection in there, just painting it in there. And that, since it's dried, it's giving me a little bit more of a hard edge that I wanted. Going to put some shadows around his little gill line here, and just keep darkening up where I see some darker parts on the little lure. I keep wanting to say fish so bad, but this is a lure. It's sort of fish shaped, but it's a lure. Put a little green up there in that highlight, blending out some of that maroon into the pinkish color. Now I'm taking a little bit of a darker yellow, and I'm going under his tummy for a shadow, and that also helps define his shape a little bit. And I'm pretty pleased with how he's looking. I am going to add some more dark shadows around his eyes with this deep maroon that I have mixed up. And I am adding another ring, like right on the inside of that darker ring. Adding a few little shadows under his, or like around his gills. Now I'm just taking some green dots and putting them right down the center of his body line. And then I'm going to take a little bit more yellow and darken up the top half of his eye just to give it sort of a shadow, a little bit more dimension. Getting some more black in there and sort of cleaning up the roundness of his eyes. I wasn't as round as I wanted, so I just cleaned that up. Now I'm going back into my maroon. Now this upper body is still wet, so this maroon is sort of blending into that upper body, which is fine. And then I'm just adding some more little maroon dots right above the green dots. And not really a pattern, and I'm not really following how the actual lure looks. I'm just putting in some pattern that suits me. Now I've got my Payne's gray. Actually, it's black with a little bit of water added so that it's more like a Payne's gray, but it's not Payne's gray. It is a lamp black. And I've just watered it down, and I'm going ahead in there and adding in the hook, the little triple hooks, as well as a little spinner that's coming down off of that hook, as well as the ring that connects the hook to the actual lure. Notice that I'm leaving a little bit of the white space of the paper shining through so that it looks like highlights. I'm adding more black to the shadows, a little bit more concentrated. I'm going to go ahead and paint those rings on his tail, and then the ring that connects the hook to the end of his tail, and then of course the hooks in the same way. I am leaving some white of the paper shining through for highlights and darkening up the shadows with a little bit more concentrated black. Easy peasy, nothing to it. When we were little, my dad caught a 45-pound catfish. No, it was 49-pound. A 49-pound catpit fish out of the Cape Fear River. And I'm going to tell you, there's two like young guys fishing on the bank near us. They weren't fishing with us, they were fishing near us. And when my dad was having so much trouble, because he just pulled it in with a regular rod and reel, he was having trouble pulling it in. They waded out there waist deep into the Cape Fear River, and they got on each side of that catfish and pulled it on in for my dad. And we carried it home. We strapped it to a board like a deer or something, and we carried it home. My mom and dad put each end of the board over their shoulders and took it home with us. And that was just an amazing thing. I had never seen a catfish. I mean, bigger ones have been caught, just not by us. So that was the biggest catfish I had ever seen. It was almost as big as I was. I think I was 10 years old when that happened. And at 49 pounds, I probably wasn't much more. I probably weighed 70 pounds by then. but the catfish was pretty big to me. And then we gave it to our neighbor, and he made catfish steaks out of it, and he appreciated it and loved it. Now back to this painting here. I have taken some bright yellow and a little bit of orange, and I've just painted in the body. I've gotten the brighter yellow at the bottom part of his body, that more pale orange on the top. His eye is just a really deep cadmium orange. And while that top part of his body is wet, I'm adding some more of that orange and just letting it look like stripes and soften up. And I've taken some yellow and painted in the little beak part. I don't know what that's called. It's part of the lure, but it's not supposed to be part of the fish. It's just a plastic sort of like nub that's on the end of him. So I don't know. Now I'm taking a little bit of the black, and while it's still wet, I'm going in between those orange stripes. But the water is doing the work for me. It's blending that black across his back. But it is thankfully staying in the areas where I'm putting it, so that's good. And now I'm just adding some shadows again with the watered down black, so that it's sort of gray. The lure is still wet, so it's really giving some soft shadows. I really like that look. Later on, once it dries, if I need a little bit more crisp shadows, I can come in there and do that. Right now, I'm just sort of laying the groundwork, laying the foundation. I'm leaving a little white around his eye and on his gill because he has a nice highlight there, so I'm trying to preserve that by not painting over it. I've got a little deeper orange right at his gill, right where his gill and his body meet. Now I'm just taking some black and doing some little horizontal lines just to give him some texture and just to give it a little bit more dimension. A little darker orange right on his belly, just right along the very edge of his belly, and that defines his shape a little bit. And some more black paint down his back, and then there's sort of a black, it's more of a gray, but it's a line that's going right down the middle of his body. So I'm just trying to get these little stripes that start on the top of his back and across his little face, just getting those in there by just adding a little bit of that black to the wet paint and letting it kind of spread. And later on we'll paint in the stripes. He's got some black stripes. Now I'm just doing tiny little black dots. He has a pattern on him. I'm not trying to do the pattern exactly. Again, I'm using my artistic license, and I encourage you to do it as well. But instead of drawing the exact pattern, which would be probably too tedious, I'm just doing some little black dots right across his back. And they're not actually dots, they're just sort of marks. I'm going to call those little marks across his back because they're not round, they're not lines, they're just marks. So I'm just going to continue to do that and fill those in to give him some texture. And I am adding a little bit of the gray. There's a gray portion right here, so I'm just doing a little wash of watered down lamp black that turns into a gray with more water, obviously. And now he's got a little fin here, and there's a shadow on top of his fin that's connected to his body, but the fin is actually connected to his body, but it does have a little shadow at the top. So I went ahead and put that shadow in. Now I'm just adding a little bit more black textures, just little lines, little diagonal lines. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing that I did for the top lure and paint in those hooks using a variety of saturated black and watery black. Saturated for the shadows, watery for the lighter areas, and leaving parts of the white of the paper to shine through as the highlights. And we're just going to go ahead and paint those in, and the rings as well that attach it to the lure's body. And I'm really liking the way these lures are turning out. They look really good to me, I think. Of course, I might be biased since it's my painting, but I think they're coming out pretty good. I'm going to just dip into some of this black and go ahead and try to paint the stripes in. And to get those stripes painted in, I'm using my black, but I am mixing some water with it, so it's sort of the consistency of a light cream, because I want these to be dark black stripes. I don't want them to be gray. So they're a little more concentrated, has a little less water, more pigment. It's like cream, like a light cream, not a heavy cream, a light cream. And so I am putting in those stripes, and I'm sort of going along with the reference photo. Not exactly, again, using some artistic license. You don't have to copy photos exactly or references exactly. You could add your own touch to what you like and what you think looks good. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to, because that is your own sort of style, and you're putting your own little twist on things when you do that, and I like that. People should make it their own. You shouldn't be a slave to a reference photo. And if no one has told you today, you are doing a great job, and I want you to keep on going. Now I've got my little white gel pen out, and I am just making some highlight areas on each one, in the hooks, around the eyes, around the tip of the nose on this one. And I'm really just putting them in where I think they'll look good. I'm not even following the reference photo. I'm just putting in some white marks where I think it would help the fish stand out and look good, and really just sort of pull the composition together. And I think I'm doing a good job. I like it. So I want you to do that if you have a white gel pen. If you don't, just get you some white gouache and a fine, small paintbrush, and just paint in your highlights where you want them. I just like to use the pen. It's easier for me to use, and I don't know. It seems like it's more exact, like I can get it to go exactly where I want it. Sometimes with a paintbrush, I'm not that lucky. So I'm also going along the bottom fish in some of the areas that I want highlights, not fish, the bottom lure. Don't listen to me, people. The bottom lure. Now I've switched over, and I have gotten some micro pen that is black, and I'm adding some of the darker shadows, especially to those hooks in there. And I've got it's a number 2 or a number 3, 02 or a 03 that I'm putting in there. So they are tinier shadows than I would have gotten with my watercolor brush. And I'm just sort of outlining some of the areas that I want to have nice shadows. And that really just brings out those hooks a lot more. So it just really adds some definition to them and brings those out. Sometimes I like to use my micro pen to outline things, and I think it makes it look good. Now I really like this, and you can leave this without a background if you would like. It's totally up to you. I am just taking and blending in some of these colors here. Now if you want more, you can try my free watercolor course, How to Paint a Beautiful Butterfly. I also have a blog you can go and check out. I have a list of my favorite watercolor supplies. I also have a membership, Viv's Creative Connection, and as well as the Sweet Art Squad. So go check that out. That's over on my website, artwithviv.com. And I'd love to see you over there. Now, like I said, you can leave this white and then just like do a border around it or something like that, like a line border. Or I've decided just to try out doing some really deep blue, wetting the surface first and dropping in some really dark blue and letting it be modeled, not just all one solid blue. We want it to have some different variations of the color blue. And I'm just working my way around the painting until I get it all in. And I think I like it either way. I like it without the background, and I like it with this background. So it's totally up to you. If you want to add a background, then go for it. If you don't, they look perfectly fine without a background. So there you have it. I have just about gotten it done. We're going to unwrap it in just a second so you can see. And there it is, a beautiful, beautiful little fishing card for your dad. Thank you for watching. Please share it with a friend if you know someone that will get something out of it. Hit the like, hit subscribe, and I will see you soon.